picking up the threads from the Afghan rubble. Of all the countries involved in Afghanistan, India possibly has the best credentials to enable Kabul's neutrality. The Taliban does appear to have established control, by and large, over Afghanistan, with the last remaining holdout at Panjshir having fallen. Nevertheless, many more questions than answers exist. One significant question is whether the global war on terror has been consigned to the detritus of history or not. Much turmoil, terror shoots. The latest episode in Afghanistan's tragic history has resulted in several thousands being displaced, and many thousands being forced to flee the country. The overweening threat, however, remains, including the presence of many newer terrorist outfits, such as Daesh, ISIS-K, Al-Qaeda, Jaish-e-Mohammed, JEM, Lashkar-e-Taiba, Let, Atom-K, a militant group from China's Xinjiang, the Fidyi-Maghas, all of which are the enduring legacies of 20 years of foreign occupation. The Taliban have in the meantime announced the setting up of a 33-member interim government, headed by Mullah Mohammad Hossain as the acting prime minister. Prominent appointees include Abdul Ghani Baradar as acting deputy prime minister, Sirajuddin Haqqani as acting interior minister, Mullah Muhammad Yaqub as acting defense minister, and Amir Khan Muttaqi as acting foreign minister. Notwithstanding earlier pronouncements by the Taliban, the government is, for the present, solely a Taliban construct, and overwhelmingly Pashtun in character. Pakistan holds certain key cards given the prominent role assigned to its protégés, Sirajuddin Haqqani and Muhammad Yaqub, the son of Mullah Omar. The new government is unlikely to be fazed by the fact that quite a few members of the interim government are on various terror lists, including that of the United Nations and the United States. A great deal of wringing of hands about the choices made may exist, but on a deeper reflection, it would be apparent that the original sin was the US agreement with the Taliban last year, which conferred on the group a degree of international recognition. Many more aftershocks can also be expected. Hopes of a pragmatic Afghanistan behind the religious garb may thus prove highly evanescent. What was achieved in Afghanistan, despite 2 decades of US and North Atlantic Treaty Organization (NATO) occupation, can be summed up in 3 words: an unmitigated disaster. Destruction of the terror network, essentially of the Al-Qaeda network, was an objective which was far from achieved. Terror networks were driven underground for a time, but many new variants such as the Islamic State and many offshoots of the same thrive not only in Afghanistan but also in many different regions of the globe. India's engagement. The facade of seeking to impose democracy in Afghanistan currently stands exposed, but the real damage possibly done is to the idea of democracy itself. Act and friction. A national commission is essential to make appointments to tribunals. Recent developments have demonstrated the Union government's implacable determination to undermine the autonomy of the various tribunals in the country. It recently got Parliament to enact the Tribunals Reforms Act, which contained provisions that had been struck down by the Supreme Court in an ordinance issued earlier. After being sharply questioned by the Supreme Court on the unusual delay in filling up vacancies among judicial and administrative members, it released a set of appointments this week. The court found that there was cherry-picking among the names chosen by the various selection committees. Instead of exhausting the selection list put together by panels of judges and officials, the government had waded into the waiting list to exercise its choice. In another development, the government cut short the tenure of the acting chairperson of the National Company Law Appellate Tribunal, NCLA, Justice A.I.S. Chima, by 10 days. Mr. Chima was set to deliver in some matters on which the NCLA had reserved judgment before retiring on September 20. The government's justification was that it was going by its latest law, under which the acting chairperson's 4-year tenure would end on September 10 and that Justice M. Venugopal had already been appointed in his place. However, a bench headed by the Chief Justice of India, N.V. Ramnar, was of the strong opinion that he should be allowed to complete his tenure, and even remarked that the court would not hesitate to stay the operation of the Act on its own motion. Fortunately, the matter was resolved quickly, with the government backing down and agreeing that Justice Venugopal would go on leave until Justice Chima finished his stint on September 20. The issue of tribunals has been a source of considerable friction between the government and the court. They have often disagreed on the eligibility criteria and conditions of service, and a series of judgments have gone against the government. Clauses introducing changes to the conditions of service of members of the various tribunals have often been subjected to judicial review. Courts want to ensure that a reasonable tenure was available to the appointees, and do not allow criteria related to age and experience to be used to undermine their independence. Tribunals have always been seen as institutions that were rung lower in independence as regular courts, even though there is wide agreement that administrative tribunals are required for quicker and more focused adjudication of cases that required specialization and domain expertise. As several laws now provide for such adjudicative bodies, the executive does have an interest in retaining some leverage over their members. The Supreme Court has repeatedly called for the establishment of a National Tribunals Commission to make suitable appointments and evaluate the functioning of tribunals. Xi calls for a moderate Afghanistan. Foreign Minister Wang Yi attended an informal meeting with officials from Russia, Pakistan and Iran. Anant Krishnan. China's President Xi Jinping on Friday called on the new government in Afghanistan to adopt prudent and moderate policies and said its neighbors should encourage Kabul to do so, with Beijing stepping up its diplomacy with countries in the region, including Russia, Pakistan, and Iran. Mr. Xi was addressing virtually the Shanghai Cooperation Organization (SCO) summit in Dushanbe, which Prime Minister Narendra Modi also addressed on Friday. In his speech, Mr. Modi warned of the dangers of radicalization and extremism posed to the region stemming from the instability there. Mr. Xi made a similar point, urging the members of the SCO to encourage Afghanistan to put in place a broad-based and inclusive political framework, adopt prudent and moderate domestic and foreign policies, resolutely fight all forms of terrorism, live in amity with its neighbors and truly embark on a path of peace, stability and development. He said the country faced many daunting challenges, and it needs the support and assistance of the international community, as he called on SCO members to step up coordination, make full use of platforms such as the SCO Afghanistan Contact Group and facilitate a smooth transition. The 8-member SCO, including Russia, China, India, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Pakistan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan, included Iran as its latest member at the summit. On the Afghanistan issue, China has been stepping up its diplomacy with Russia and Pakistan in particular. Foreign Minister Wang Yi, who attended the summit in Dushanbe, on Thursday held an informal meeting with Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, Pakistani Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi and Assistant to Iranian Foreign Minister Sayed Rasul Musavi. The four-country grouping, Mr. Wang said, had a role to play as important neighbors of Afghanistan and influential countries in the region. It is necessary for us four countries to strengthen communication and coordination, make unanimous voices, exert positive influence, and play a constructive role in the smooth transition of the situation in Afghanistan, Mr. Wang said. He outlined a 5-point proposal for the four countries to follow, including urging the US to learn lessons from the past, working to tackle spillover of security risks and getting the new Taliban regime to make a clean break with terrorist forces, and providing assistance to the war-torn country. Australia shrugs off China anger on nuclear subs. We are interested in ensuring that international waters are always international waters, says PM. Agence France Presse Sydney. Australia on Friday shrugged off Chinese anger over its decision to acquire US nuclear-powered submarines, while vowing to defend the rule of law in airspace and waters where Beijing has staked hotly contested claims. US President Joe Biden announced the new Australia-US-Britain Defence Alliance on Wednesday, extending US nuclear submarine technology to Australia as well as cyber defense, applied artificial intelligence and undersea capabilities. Beijing described the new alliance as an extremely irresponsible threat to regional stability, questioning Australia's commitment to nuclear non-proliferation and warning the Western allies that they risked shooting themselves in the foot. China has its own very substantive program of nuclear submarine building, Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison argued on Friday in an interview with radio station 2GB. They have every right to take decisions in their national interests for their defense arrangements, and of course so does Australia and all other countries, he said. In a series of media interviews, the Australian leader said his government was reacting to changing dynamics in the Asia-Pacific region where territory is increasingly contested and competition is rising. Australia is very aware of China's nuclear submarine capabilities and growing military investment, he told Channel 7 television. We are interested in ensuring that international waters are always international waters and international skies are international skies, and that the rule of law applies equally in all of these places, he said. Australia wanted to ensure that there were no no-go zones in areas governed by international law, the Prime Minister said. That's very important, whether it is for trade, whether it is for things like undersea cables, for planes and where they can fly. I mean, that is the order that we need to preserve. That is what peace and stability provides for, and that is what we are seeking to achieve. Stab in the back. The move also infuriated France, aghast at losing a contract to supply conventional submarines to Australia that was worth $36.5 billion when signed in 2016. Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian said it was a stab in the back from Australia. But the main backdrop to the alliance is China's junta to put Suu Kyi on graft trial. She faces 4 new charges, each carrying a maximum sentence of 15 years. Agence France Presse Yangon. Myanmar's junta will put ousted leader Aung San Suu Kyi on trial for corruption, her lawyer said on Friday, adding to a raft of ongoing cases that could see her jailed for decades. Ms. Suu Kyi has been under house arrest since her National League for Democracy (NLD) government was deposed by the military in a February coup that sparked a mass uprising and a brutal crackdown on dissent. The 76-year-old Nobel laureate is currently on trial for flouting coronavirus restrictions during polls the NLD won in a landslide last year, illegally importing walkie-talkies and sedition. Each corruption charge carries a maximum sentence of 15 years. Trial to begin on October 1. She will face a new trial on 4 charges of corruption beginning on October 1 in the capital Naypyidaw, her lawyer King Mangza said. The newest trial forms part of a junta plan to get her, Suu Kyi, out of the picture, said Minimum, a researcher at Human Rights Watch. Dragging out legal proceedings while Suu Kyi is confined to an unknown location will impact the ability of the NLD to bounce back and deny her supporters a point around which to rally, Ms. Ma added. The ongoing trials were delayed for 2 months as Myanmar grappled with the coronavirus surge and only resumed this week, with Ms. Suu Kyi skipping the first day on health grounds. Journalists have been barred from all proceedings so far. The junta has also charged her for accepting illegal payments of gold and violating a colonial-era secrecy law, although these are yet to come to court. SC Collegium on mission mode to fill vacancies. Recommendations include 8 new Chief Justices across HCs. Krishnadas Rajgopal. New Delhi. The Supreme Court Collegium, led by Chief Justice of India N.V. Ramnar, is proceeding with staggering speed to fill vacancies and strengthen the judiciary as seen in the latest slew of recommendations, which include 8 new Chief Justices for the High Courts, the transfer of 5 High Court Chief Justices and the shuffling of 28 High Court judges across the country. It has been reliably learnt that the 8 High Court judges recommended for elevation as Chief Justices of High Courts include Acting Chief Justice of the Calcutta High Court Justice Rajesh Bindal as Chief Justice of the Allahabad High Court. Among the 5 Chief Justices learned to have been recommended for transfer is Justice A. Qureshi of the Tripura High Court. He has been recommended for transfer to the Rajasthan High Court as its Chief Justice. He was in the middle of a prolonged stalemate between the Collegium and the government over his initial appointment as the Madhya Pradesh High Court Chief Justice about 2 years ago. The past month has seen the Collegium recommend over 100 judicial appointments, several transfers and elevations of judges, advocates and Chief Justices. The Collegium began its work on a historic note with the successful recommendation of 9 new judges to the Supreme Court that were quickly approved by the government.